Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1988 film Sunset. Now, Sunset is a very odd film. And the reason why I call it an odd movie is because it's an odd mix of different genres that don't really fit together very well. So, it's one part drama, then it's another part mystery. Then you have elements of a comedy that are sprinkled in. And then on top of that, it's also a period piece. And then on top of that, it's also a Western. So it's all these different genres that are just cobbled together in this weird pastiche. And understandably, it doesn't gel. It doesn't really work. The film is directed by Blake Edwards. And I'm not going to say his direction in this is bad, but it's also nothing really that impressive. It lacks the same energy that something like Blind Date had a year prior, and it definitely lacks the same consistent quality that a lot of his other more well-known classic films have. There are moments where it kind of just looks like a TV movie. There are also other moments where it looks really good. So it's like one of those things where it's just very uneven. And it makes sense because the whole film is uneven. It's uneven when it comes to the tone. It's uneven when it comes to the quality of the writing. It's uneven when it comes to the performances. It's uneven when it comes to pretty much every element of the movie. So it makes sense that the direction is also uneven. And it's just one of those films where you can tell that Blake had some passion for this project, and it does show in some of the more ambitious and really strong sequences, because there are some moments in this film that are good, that look great. The opening sequence, for instance, which is a action sequence from a film that Tom Mix is shooting. So it's this Western, and it's shot really well. And there are other moments like that throughout this movie, but then there's other moments where it just looks flat and just lacks energy and lacks really a lot of excitement. And it's just one of those movies where I don't think it really knew what it wanted to be from the very beginning, and that's never a good sign. And it's difficult for any director, no matter how talented they are, to really make something like that work on a consistent basis. So that's why you have issues with the tone and how one scene can look different than the other in terms of the way that it's shot, and that can work in a certain context, but not with the way that things were written or the way that things were structured with this film, which is very clunky. The script is by Blake Edwards, and this screenplay, I'm not going to say it sucks, but it's not very good. See, it has moments where it's trying to be a comedy, maybe even a satire of old Hollywood, but then it has moments when it's trying to be a serious mystery, a whodunit about murder, and you have Tom Mix, the movie star, and Wyatt Earp teaming up to try to solve the murder, but then you have other stuff that's really serious and dramatic, like a really thick, heavy subplot about domestic violence. So it's like one of those things where, like, okay, we're trying to be a fun buddy mystery movie with Tom Mix and Wyatt Earp teaming up to stop the bad guys, and then we're also trying to be a drama about domestic violence and rape. Like, what are we fucking doing here? Like, what the hell, Blake Edwards? And I know some people have said that it's a lighthearted affair. I don't know about that at all. I don't think this is a lighthearted affair. Like, you've got serious scenes about domestic violence and abuse. Someone even dies in this movie because of the result of domestic abuse. She's hit so hard by her husband that she dies in a hospital. And so that's very lighthearted and airy entertainment. No, it's not at all. And see, that's honestly one of my biggest problems with this film, is that the tone is just so all over the place. It at one moment you'll be laughing at a line of dialogue from Wyatt Earp, and then in another moment you'll be like, "Oh my god, that's rough." People talking about abuse and rape and just really heavy subject matter. And when it comes to some of the more grand moments in the film, the way that they're written, it's very weak. Like, you have a couple shootouts and they're all right, but you have a scene where Tom Mix and Wyatt Earp get on a plane, and you're thinking this is going to lead to an exciting, fun, creative action sequence, right? Maybe a chase in midair, or maybe they'll be on the plane and they'll fly around and they'll try to chase after some guys who are on the ground in a car, or you think that there will be something more to it. But no, they get on a plane, they fly around for a little bit, and then they land in a farm like it wasn't really that much of a problem at all. Like, they're on the plane for what feels like a moment where if you blink, you'll miss it. And, like, that's the kind of stuff that's just really prevalent in this script that just makes this story so lame and so forgettable. It's a good idea. I like the premise of having a movie star from the era of the late 20s teaming up with the real life Wyatt Earp. And they're teaming up and they're trying to solve a murder. I like that. I think that's a fun idea and that's a good concept. I like the setup of the villain. I think the villain, who is the studio head, is very despicable, and you definitely want to see this guy Alfie get his comeuppance. You want to see him get his just desserts. So it does a good job setting up the villain. He's an abusive, manipulative, sociopathic prick, and you have a lot of stuff here that could lead to something potentially good and potentially special, but it just doesn't really pick a lane. It's trying to drive in all the lanes when it really just needs to pick one and stick with it. Be a murder mystery, or be a comedy, or be a western. Like, don't be all of them plus a drama dealing with domestic abuse and rape. So, yeah, the script is just not really where it needs to be. It's not as refined as it should have been. And it's a shame. It really is. And that's why it really failed to resonate with audiences at the time and with a lot of critics. And I can get it. It's a film that's just not really cohesive enough when it comes to the narrative, and things are just so inconsistent in terms of quality. There's one of those things where you're like, yeah, there are some moments, there are some things about this movie that I like, but there's a lot of stuff that just doesn't work. And so it just doesn't resonate strongly. It just doesn't stick with people. The cast, it's also uneven. I like Bruce Willis. He's one of my favorite actors. And it was interesting to see him in a film like this. But this was just not the right kind of actor for this film. Bruce Willis just sticks out like a sore thumb in this movie. He acts like Bruce Willis in Moonlighting, or Bruce Willis in a typical Bruce Willis movie, but he's supposed to be a guy from the late 20s. And it just doesn't work. It doesn't really mesh very well with the other performances in the film. It also leads to him not really having the best chemistry of James Garner as Wyatt Earp. Like, they have some scenes where they click, but there's a lot of other scenes where they just are kind of at odds with one another because of the clash of different styles. And apparently James Garner didn't like working with Bruce Willis on this movie. He called him a teenager. He said that he was just very not necessarily inappropriate, but he just didn't take things seriously enough. And he didn't like that he was trying to improvise all the time. And you could kind of tell that in scenes where you could kind of tell that James Garner was just sick of Bruce Willis's shit. Like, he just didn't want to fucking do this movie anymore. And that's never a good sign when it comes to a film that features two actors that are on the screen as much as they are in this movie. Bruce Willis, I'm not going to say his performance was bad. It's not a bad performance by Bruce. It's a decent performance by Bruce. He's still got a lot of charisma. He's got a lot of energy. When it comes to the action scenes, when he's firing guns or he's getting into fights, he's very effective in that regard. And he still has that inherent Bruce Willis charm. It even leads to a very fun dance number at one point in the movie. But it's still a performance that just doesn't fit with this film. James Garner, on the other hand, is a perfect fit, and you can understand why he has more screen time, despite Bruce Willis, I think, getting top billing, if I remember correctly. It's not really a Bruce Willis movie. It's more of a James Garner and Bruce Willis film. And James Garner was a real treat. I thought he was terrific as Wyatt Earp. He was the main reason why I was even able to keep up with the film or even care about the plot, is because I really loved watching James Garner's performance as Wyatt Earp. Just no nonsense, just old school cool. And Malcolm McDowell was also magnificent as the malevolent, just malicious, evil scumbag, Alfie Alperin. It was a really interesting contrast to have him be this happy tramp character, which is inspired by Chaplin. And then he's this sinister, just twisted sociopath who is now running a film studio because he has all this power and influence. He's able to pay off people and do all these shady things and cover up his history of domestic violence and now murder. So, yeah, Malcolm McDowell was a really inspired bit of casting. Mariel Hemingway as Cheryl. Mariel Hemingway was just meh. She's not a good actress. I gotta be honest. I've seen her in a lot of things, and I have yet to see a performance that has really stood out to me as being legitimately good or great. At best, she's been like run of the mill, like in the middle. I'm not impressed. I think she's not really that great of an actress. No offense to Mariel, but I just don't really see a lot from her that really wows me. Kathleen Quinlan, it was nice to see her. I've always liked her performances. I like her as an actress. She did a good job as the spunky secretary kind of reporter. Not really reporter. She was more of a secretary kind of character as Nancy. Emmet Walsh has a bit role as a Chief Dibner, this police chief. Joe Dallesandro plays Dutch Kiefer, this mob boss guy. You also have Richard Bradford, who plays Captain Blackworth, this corrupt cop. He's been in a fair amount of things. He was in... Yeah, he's been in a lot of stuff. Like, he was in Sunset, but he was also in Internal Affairs as a police captain. He was Officer Hank Magruder in Dr. Giggles. But really, the main standouts are Bruce Willis, James Garner, and Malcolm McDowell. And Kathleen Quinlan in some ways as well. And you also have a very early role from Dermot Mulroney, who plays Michael Alperin. And I guess there were two actors who played Laurel and Hardy, but I don't remember Laurel and Hardy even being in this film. So maybe it's one of those things where I missed it, or I just didn't care. I don't know. Because it is a film that does struggle to keep your interest throughout because of just how uneven so many things about it are. The cinematography by Anthony B. Richmond, it's rich, it's lush, it really does capture the time period very well. I will say that's one of the more consistent things about the movie when it comes to the quality is the cinematography. It's a really nice looking film. The editing by Robert Pergament, who edited Blake Edwards' previous film a year prior in Blind Date. The editing here, it's not as impressive as Blind Date for me. Like, it's fine, it's there, it's serviceable, but I don't know, it's just nothing really that punchy or that strong. The score by Henry Mancini, though, is fantastic. That's another consistent element of this film, other than the cinematography, is the score by Henry Mancini. This is a really rousing, fun, memorable score that captures the just sense of adventure from this era of filmmaking perfectly. It's a great score. It's a shame that it's stuck in such a forgettable, bland, and dull movie. The film did not do well when it came out. It cost $19 million and only made $4 million in the box office. Critics hated it. Audiences either didn't like it or didn't care. And it's a film that it's interesting to watch at least once just to see the concept and just to see how things pan out and to see Bruce Willis in such a different kind of role for him. But a lot of that's very fleeting because then you're just stuck with a film that's just very lame and boring and a movie that just doesn't really find the right gear. And it's not funny at all. I guess not at all. At all is a little much because there were some moments with James Garner that made me chuckle, but nothing that makes me really want to say it's a good comedy. Doesn't make me laugh my ass off or anything. There really aren't any laugh out loud moments. Might chuckle a couple times, but that's it. The action when it is there is just mediocre at best, and at worst, pretty awful. Like the plane scene. Like, why was that even there? They didn't even do anything. They got on the plane, they flew around in the air for a little bit, and then landed in a field with a bunch of cows. There's a couple shootouts that are okay. The climax at the end, it leads to a standoff that's serviceable. I do appreciate the fact that the film tries to have some edge to it, but it went a little too far with that because it doesn't really blend very well with the other elements of the movie, with Tom Mix riding around on a horse with a white getup and a big white 10-gallon hat and some of these other more lighthearted moments, and then it's dealing with really serious subject matter like domestic violence and rape. So it's one of those movies where it's odd. It's a very odd film, and I can see why some people enjoy it because of that. And I'm that kind of person who usually does enjoy movies in that regard because I like the interesting, weird, and unusual films. But this just didn't work for me. It just wasn't entertaining. For the most part, like, it had its moments, but they were very few and far between. I've seen way, way worse films than Sunset, but I definitely can say I wasn't a fan of it at the end of the day. I mean, I probably would get more enjoyment out of watching an actual sunset in the future than rewatching this film, and that says a lot. So anyway, I don't really know what else to say about this weird, odd film in Bruce Willis's filmography, except thanks for watching, and as always, I'll see you later. See ya.